Hi guys, this is going to be a bit of a video analysing my 2024 season, which was my first season of bike racing. So I'll be diving into the data and having a look at how the season went as a whole, and kind of using that. A lot of this is using that to figure out what I want to change for next year and how to structure the training and the racing for 2025. I won't go into that in a huge amount of detail just because I'm planning on making a separate video about like my training plan for 2025. Now, if you follow my videos at all, you know that time trialing has been a big focus this year. So I've been doing a lot of crit racing and a little bit of road racing, but the time trialing has been kind of a background focus where I'd crit race at the weekend, but any training during the week would typically be TT work to improve my TT threshold and become efficient in position and used to producing power. So training has been kind of time trial focused, but I've also trying to be improving at the crit racing as well. So this video is going to focus on the crit racing and the road racing. I'm going to make a separate video on the time trialing side of things, as there's a lot more nuances and specifics that I want to dig into that wouldn't make sense to put in this video. So yeah, I'll just have a look at. Well, I've got my spreadsheets open. We'll have a dive into the data and see what we think.
I guess I'll have a start by looking at my training peaks and what my trainings look like over the course of the year. So it's week 58 now. I've decided to take the off season, so 10 days off the bike. So all of week 59 is going to be off. But so it's a bit more than a year that I've been training full on. So it's not too surprising that it was a bit of an ask to try and extend the season that long. But gave it a go and it didn't work out. But yeah, so moving back to 2023. So I was running during 2023, so ended the off season and of course started the off season in a similar way. Was trying to make the running work. Pulled my hamstring at the end of during an 800-meter race, and then took my 10 days off after that. And then after that, I knew that I'd focus definitely on the cycling from here on. So yeah, this was my last week down in Stevenage working at GSK, and then week one was the first week that I'd moved back to Sheffield. So very conventional off season, base season to start off with, where just building up the zone 2 miles again. Not really no intensity at all. A little bit of sprints, building up the mileage to similar sort of levels where I'd hit peaks before. I'd done a few big weeks of training before when I'd had time off from university and such. So getting up to that similar sort of level of always in that 15 to 20 hour range, I'd say consistently. So yeah, and quite early on, Zwift Academy 20. It was a very late announcement, but they announced Zwift Academy 2023, so I knew the dates for that. So I wanted to do like a bit of a training plan to get in some sort of fitness for it. So introducing a little bit of intensity, not a huge amount to be honest, just some VO2 max work and tempo, as well as some like testing efforts just to kind of sharpen up. And it's only like a 5 week training block. I wasn't expecting to get much fitness from it, but even though I wasn't cycling as my main thing in 2022 2023, the training that I was doing was still like decently high quality. So I had that baseline of fitness, which is the main thing that I took into Zwift Academy. Like this training block really didn't really get me much fitter. It's the sharpening, getting back to training and looking at my TSS. It was consistently building that up. So week 0 to week 5 was the conventional, just building up the zone 2 miles, and then week 6 to week 10 was when I'd introduced that bit of intensity, and week 11 to 17, 18 was Zwift Academy. Once I started Zwift Academy, that was my intensity. Everything else was just zone 2 miles, because they weren't good training sessions. They were pretty much all not to the same extent as this year, but they were all just testing efforts where it was just a certain time point that you had to do a max effort for, like the first one being this 30-minute max effort. So they don't really get you fitter. I knew that was the case, and but it's still a fair bit of intensity. So because this would typically be your off season base season, I didn't want to be overdoing it with the intensity, even though that might have got you fitter for the workouts. In the long run, I knew that wouldn't be the best approach. So just getting the workouts done and still trying to build up the consistent zone 2 mileage. So during that period, thing is, I messed around with my FTP setting in training peaks. It suggested my FTP had gone up to 390, 395, and I'd changed that, and that's obviously going to affect how it calculates every single one of your rides. Whereas now that even though now that my opinion has very much changed on how your 20-minute effort estimates your FTP, so I changed it back to 380 watts. I feel like it was midway through the season. I feel like it was during maybe one of these dips where I'm thinking my FTP is not 390. Yeah, November, December, got on Resist Academy, got all the workouts done, and was really happy with how those had gone. And then after that, it was, like I say, it was a fair amount of intensity to be doing at that time of year. So I wanted to, unless you're doing cyclocross, but don't do that. So um, after that, I definitely wanted to ease off the gas and do a more conventional approach of a base season of building up the zone 2 miles. And also around this time, I'd be really interested about doing low cadence training and seeing how that could convert into better performance on the bike, even though there's not really any scientific studies behind it. It's pretty clear that all the pro teams like using it, so they're probably using it for a reason, you know. And I was typically doing my workouts at trying to build up time at around 70 newton meters, which is a figure that I kind of came to naturally. I was aiming for 50 RPM, 400 watts, which is 77 newton meters, which is a figure that was quoted by Jay Vine in an interview that he had. So I used that as a starting point, and I remember those first low cadence sessions were really hard and ended up being a bit lower than that. Wasn't able to hold 400 watts at 50 RPM, so it was ended up being a bit lower at 70 newton meters. But that's definitely something I'm planning on changing next year to instead target a higher torque. As there wasn't yes, I was consistently doing 70 newton meters, but there wasn't really much reasoning behind that. It was mainly just that quote from Jay. Whereas I have some reasoning behind wanting to target the higher newton meters for next year. So yeah, finished that high torque block and then moved on to I was starting racing at the start of March, so wanted to start doing some training to get ready for that, but not going crazy with it because I knew it would be a long season of like six plus months. So if you go ham with the VO2 max early, you're really going to burn out. So whereas I knew from training in the past that threshold work you can get it done week by week by week, and you're gonna the improvement's going to be steady, and you're not going to see some crazy fitness gains, but it's reliable. You're not going to burn out. So and for the TT work, it's not just the fitness gains, it's the like the neuromuscular pathways of becoming more efficient at producing power in that difficult position. So yeah, start of March had my first race, but pretty much all the races apart from the nationals in August, I was just using them as training to an extent. Like I'd take a rest day beforehand, but there wasn't a taper for any of these races just because I was so new to it, and it's just the amount I was planning on racing. It was I wouldn't be able to taper. I wouldn't get any training done if I was trying to taper for these races. So when I started racing, like I said, started doing some TT threshold work. Stopped doing the high torque work. It wasn't just TTs. It was like I was doing these crit races, so started crit racing as well, and that's kind of your VO2 max and your anaerobic side of things. But then all the training that I do during the week would be the TT threshold work, and I think that works quite well because I didn't have other than illness, I didn't hit any crazy levels of fitness during the year, but it was consistent. I knew I could show up week to week and I'd produce good power. The reason I wasn't doing so well wasn't because of my power really. So yeah, struggled in those early races, just basic tactical errors. But later on, I was like these races. First crits I managed to finish, and I was starting to get the hang of it. But yeah, training looked quite similar around that time. This time, week 33, I tried to do a 1 hour FTP test in the TT position and just wasn't able to handle it, and that kind of made me realise that it's all well and good doing 10-minute, 12-minute, 14-minute threshold efforts, and you can consistently bump up the power like week to week, month to month. And you think, oh, I'm getting super fit here. Does that actually convert to doing a 25-mile TT? The demands of doing a longer training effort, a 20-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute TT effort, is very different to the shorter one. So you take the ego hit, you do the harder, more specific session, but that's gonna actually help you in the long run. So yeah, around this time I'd been thinking about my training a lot, and I'd actually, this is a training plan that I wrote that week, and it was basically my training for the rest of the year. So the next 20 weeks, I planned out every session, and it's like it doesn't have to be complicated. It's these two sheets of paper. I mean, there's other sheets of paper with the more specific details of what these sessions mean, and where these races are, but this is the basics of like of 20 weeks of what I was planning on doing, and I adjusted these as and when required. If different races popped up in the calendar, or I had to adjust the training because of some illness that caused a setback. But for the most part, I tried to stick to this sort of plan. I thought that was quite cool. That I mean, I came up with my big prep for the National Time Trial Championships like 20 weeks before it happened, and I pretty much executed exactly what I was planning on doing. So yeah, more of the same going forward. But this period I was doing more races and a bit less training, so a bit less time trial specific work. But um, like I say, I moved to those longer efforts, and they were kind of a bit. I changed things up. I experimented with different things. I was doing like spiked threshold efforts where I do a hard effort followed by threshold, or like over under threshold efforts of 110 and 90% of FTP. Um, so playing around with different things, and seeing what worked well. And again, like nothing was crazy, but I was seeing like consistent fitness, and uh, I knew in the long run you're only able to do a crazy training block and build to peak fitness if you've got that base of work in the background. So I was happy to just try and be consistent during the year, and then try and peak for a specific event. So I was training and racing a fair bit, just consistently up until July. And July was when the 4 weeks before the national 25-mile time trial, and that's when I started doing a specific training block, stopped racing as much, and did a lot of TT threshold work, and a lot of TT threshold work leading up to the 25-mile nationals, then a bit of a rest week, and then a huge amount of VO2 max work leading up to the 10-mile nationals. But like I say, I'll make a separate video analysing my training leading up to the 10 and the 25-mile nationals, as those were my key events of the year. After that, I did try and hold form and complete Zwift Academy 2024, and it was all going well. I'd done the major work, the hardest workouts, I'd say, that gave the best data points of testing efforts. But then last week and a half, I really struggled with illness, and it just didn't make sense to keep going with it, because I'd lost too much training really, and I could have finished it, but then that 6 weeks of training, there'd be very little stimulus there. So I just decided to cut my losses, take the off season now, recover from the illness, and then start building back for 2025. As I was doing well at Zwift Academy, but I think it's unlikely I would have made the finals. And if I did make the finals, it would just be the case of you don't have enough road racing experience. So it's definitely going to be a big goal for 2025. But now I know that it's going to be hard to hold form after peaking for a big event like the nationals. So I'd want to adjust that. So coming into this year, in some respects, I knew what to expect, and in others, I had no idea what I was getting into really. So I've been pretty good at structuring my training since, and using Training Peaks pretty religiously for like 3+ years. So even though I hadn't been racing cycling wise, like I've had a good understanding of structuring training, and I had a power meter for in 2022. So yeah, even though I haven't been racing, I've had some data in the background just from doing like zone 2 rides to aid in my running. I've had data to look at and be like, okay, I'm probably going to be suited to these longer efforts, and time trialing might be the way to go as a heavier rider. So yeah, going into the year, I kind of knew that I'd have decent success in the time trialing, but if you're going to progress in the sport, kind of need to have both. Like the only real path, I mean, you could just race in CTT races and do really well, like this rider Chris Fennell did a few years ago, where he just didn't end up doing the road racing to a high level. But the highest level of other than team pursuit on the track and individual pursuit, the highest level of time trialists are on world tour teams. So to get on a world tour team, you need to be able to road race, and to be able to road race, like you need to be able to ride in a pack and do this bunch racing stuff. So it's I knew that I couldn't just focus on the time trialing. I'd want to progress on that and do well at the national championships, which thankfully did. But I knew that I also needed to focus on the crit racing, so that's kind of going to be the focus of crit racing, and end up being road racing at the end of the year as well. But that's going to be kind of the focus of what I'll be diving into. So yeah, as I mentioned, started out the crit racing and was in for a bit of a shock where just basic tactical errors meant that I was getting dropped. I probably had the power to be up there podium winning those races every race I entered, and you need that reality check, because at the end of the day it's a balance between your tactics and your power. Like it's not about who's the strongest rider on the day, it's about who plays their cards right and is more tactically astute. So yeah, during the year, this is like my British cycling profile. It's really nothing to write home about. 33 races and ended up getting like 84 points during the year. So got my Cat 2 at least. So Cat 4 to Cat 2, but that's with 33 races, which is a fair amount. So it's not that impressive really. And I remember making goals at the start of the year. I was thinking get my Cat 1 in the first year. And yeah, after starting racing, and especially the road racing, I'm like, okay, that would have been a really impressive thing to do. So Cat 1, if I, for next year, starting as a Cat 2, I'll need 200 points to get to Cat 1. And I think that's a very realistic goal for next year. If I really target the road races and I train in a more specific way to be in better shape for them, I mean, I think that's absolutely doable. But making that goal last year, I had no idea what racing was about, so it was a very fly on the wall type thing. Like I mentioned, 33 races, so that was 27 crits and 6 road races. And I've kind of tabulated all the data from Strava and Training Peaks, produce peak power values for the races. So I've just extracted the peak powers and then insert them into a spreadsheet, and kind of looked at the trends and stuff like that. And like pretty much all the races you enter are going to be hard. You're going to have to make some hard efforts at some point, and races don't get linearly harder. It's not, if you get fitter, you're not going to see a linear increase in your peak powers. If the speed's similar between each race and it's a similar quality of field, your peak powers are going to be all over the place. You're unlikely to see an upward trend in the peak powers. But I have seen some interesting trends. So like I said, at the start of the season, I was really struggling. I was getting dropped in these races. And like getting dropped to start off with, then I stopped getting dropped, and I was losing the wheel and having to chase back on a couple of times during each race. So in these early races, the heart rate's super high because I'm working so hard during all of the race. But there is a bit of a downward trend as the races as I progress during the season, the heart rate for the races is decreasing, as well as the average power and the normalized power to an extent. It depends on the race to race, but a function of this is not getting dropped and being better tactically, I'd say. Now the power and the average power and the normalized power for pretty much all the races still really high. That's I guess it's partly it's bad racing, partly it's racing with the wrong attitude, I'd say. So a lot of races I'd spend more time on the front than I needed to. I'd just be happy to pull a turn on the front, which it feels good to just get out there, stretch your legs, use some fitness, and if you're thinking like at the end of the race that you're not going to be in a chance with winning the sprint anyway, then you don't want to just finish that race and just be like, I just sat in the pack for the whole race. You want to feel like you did something to at least try and make a move go and such. So I'd sit on the front, make it hard, try and break the field down a little bit, as well as making attacks a fair amount to try and get away. Even though so a lot of these races were at Tameside in Manchester. This course is very technical, very short, sharp circuit, and getting a break established on this course is like. It's very unlikely to happen, but then I'd still try it week to week, which is good for the fitness. It's more fun than just sitting in for the whole race, and I kind of knew that because of the twisty turny nature of the circuit and how boxy it would get in the final lap, that I'm going to be struggling to be up there to I have the power, like I have decent sprint power. Like my five, my max power, my 5, 10, 30 seconds is good, but that's only part of the equation. You need to have the positioning coming into that final corner to be able to deploy that power and actually stay away. And I was just so inconsistent with that, and guys are just taking more risks than me on that final lap. And it's a Tuesday night regional C plus. Like I'm not going to go for a crazy risk. And I I have been I'd say I've been pushing the boat out. I've been improving technically week to week. My cornering's been getting better. Um, but I don't want to be finding the limit of grip of my tires. Like those guys taking like crashing the hairpin of that course, and I'm like, I don't want to be doing that, you know. And I mean, I did clip my clip a pedal a couple of times, and I had some like quite spectacular saves, I'd say. Um, so I'm like I'm pushing it to an extent, but any further than that, it's like it's not worth it. And I think that's kind of why I've realised that I don't think I'm as suited to the crit racing. It'll be good to continue doing it because it is a really good opportunity to get better tactically. Um, but road racing, you don't need that to as high an extent just because the nature of the circuits, they're not as technical, and it's more so that the cream will rise to the top with the higher level of fitness is what's gonna shine through really. Got these bronze, silver, and gold for like the top three peak powers for each of these time points, and you see they're kind of all over the place, just because of the race to race. Like for this race, I did my best 2 minute power. That was ended up trying to do a big 2 minute attack where. Try to get off the front sort of thing. For pretty much every race, you're going to see a good peak power, a peak sprint power, and that was consistently improving during the year. That was nice to see. But then other things like some race you're going to see a good 30-second power, another race you might see a good 1 minute power. You're unlikely to see both in the same race. That's a bad example, but yeah. In terms of the outright sprints, like you'd see your best peak power numbers for the very short sprints during these races. But something like a 30-second effort, I'm more likely to get a 30-second sprint out in. You might have been able to do it at Darley Moor, but I didn't end up doing a 30-second max sprint at Darley Moor. At Tameside, there's not a 30-second segment where you can open the legs out without having to take 4 corners. So I mainly did this to compare for my Zwift Academy performances, but there's like a function of my peak 15-second power here is 98% of my best result I saw, which was during a road race, and same for the 30-second was the best 30-second in a crit was 80% of what I did in a road race. Basically, you kind of wouldn't expect to see peak powers during a crit, so this makes sense that my best 30-second and 1 minute power during a crit were 80% and 85% of my max 30-second and 1 minute power. So this was during a race where I got like it was just a 30-second straightaway, so I was able to keep on the gas for the whole time without having to be interrupted by corners. And then this was just a testing effort I did outside. So you see that the crit performance is 80% and 85% of my theoretic of what my max power for that duration is. I think it's quite interesting to see that my 2 minute and my 5 minute comparing to my best outdoor values, they're both like 97%. So basically, I haven't done a good 2 minute and 5 minute outdoors as a testing effort because these 2 minute and 5 minute, they're really hard efforts to get down. And these ones that you're doing in a crit, they're hard, but they're never going to be a max value because if you do that max value, you're just going to be absolutely dead for the rest of the race. So this basically shows me that these performances, this was testing effort, and this was from ages ago. These could be really improved if I did a proper test of them. As I mentioned, I don't think crit racing is the way to go for me. Just because you can't just force yourself to improve at cornering. You will get better over time, but trying to find the limit of grip of your tires, it's not the way to go. You just need to consistently do it. Think about it, and then you will get better. But doing it more and more and more is just going to lead to burnout rather than actually improving in my. So, whereas the road racing, I feel like it's more fitness dependent, and I really enjoyed this a lot more than the crit racing, to be honest. So I started doing it. It wasn't part of the original plan that I wrote. Part of adapting that plan was uh, realizing that I should probably have a go at these road races, and then realize I enjoyed it a lot more, and decided to sign up for some more of them in the latter half of the season. So didn't start doing it till later on, but obviously really glad I did it, because now I've realised that that's the way to go, really. So I struggled in the first race because the demands of a road race is a lot different to a crit race. So the training that I'd done during the year was really threshold specific. As I thought I'd only be racing up to an hour for a 25-mile time trial or a crit race, but the road races are 2, 3, 4 hours. So you need to have that different level of the specificity, in the training is definitely different to be in peak form for those. So that's why I DNF this first race. I just wasn't able to keep up with the bloody hard race at that as well. Just wasn't able to keep up with the reproducibility on the hills, like doing a big VO2 3-minute VO2 max effort each lap. I was able to hang on for the first four laps or so, then by the fifth one I was just spat out of the back. The second race I was ill, so I mean that was a stupidly hard race as well from the guys who finished it, but yeah, I was ill, so I wasn't able to do that. But the next 4 races I was able to at least get round, and I feel like by the fourth one I was starting to get the hang of it, and came away with a decent result in a regional A. I'd say the road races is definitely the way to go. Kind of, I did mention in the crits where you kind of get bored and you do a bigger turn on the front, you start attacking some more. You're not at risk of doing that in a road race. Like, a road race is so much harder that you kind of have to race it tactically to be in with a you're unlikely to do anything stupid just to, oh, I'm not going to make it in the sprint, I might as well go for these silly attacks now. You're not going to do that because it's so much longer and harder that you need to be smarter about it to be in a chance with being up there, really. Yeah, even though one of the goals at the start of the season was to make it to Cap 1, I think being Cat 2 at the end of the season is kind of perfect, really. Is just based on the racing I've done. So these regional A's and Nat B's, the regional A's, there's so many strong Cat 2 and even Cat 3 riders that these are also actually really high quality racers, and to be able to still do them next year. So prioritize the road racing. So I'll just be doing loads of regional A's and Nat B's. I'll still get to do those, hopefully for, well, depends how well things are going, depends how many races I'll get to do. But being able to do the regional A's next year is kind of still a blessing, really. And getting a result in that sort of race is still really impressive, in my opinion. Yeah, overall, racing out on the road is, I think, is the way to go. A road racing result is a lot more impressive than a crit racing result. So that's what I'm going to be prioritizing instead. Also noticed just a trend in my races. So so it was all like mainly Cat 3, Cat 3-4, Cat 2-3-4, but the Cat 2-3-4s are at Tameside, and those races, it kind of just felt like it was very unlikely to separate and cause splits. Every move that goes gets chased back, sort of thing. It's a very short race. People are fit for that race, and they're not willing to let a breakaway get established. Whereas I only did one Cat E123 crit, but I did notice in that people were just happy to let a break get established, as you can chase it back, and it's typical racing where a break gets established, it gets let off the leash, and then it's the peloton's job to control that. You see that in the road races and all the way up to World Tour. Like, that's just how racing's done. Whereas at the lower level races, it just feels like, oh, someone's up the road, I need to chase it back now. So, like, you get the better racing dynamics at the higher level races, but I guess that's to be expected. So yeah, I'm not sure how many crits I'll do next year. Maybe a couple, just for fun, really. But they're still good training. But I don't think they necessarily. You can still see these increases in powers for doing the road races as well. And overall, the road races are a lot harder and a bigger training stimulus. But something I'd like to point out is this power range of 5 seconds to 5 minutes is probably something I want to focus on. I didn't really have a focus on that this year. Like I said, I did the high torque work, but there wasn't a huge amount of focus behind that. It was just doing it at 70 newton meters, as that felt like the standard value to do. Whereas, like I mentioned, I'm planning on doing a higher torque range. And that's kind of to improve these values. And so during the year, I was doing the main training I was doing was TT threshold work, and there was really no focus on the 5 second to 5 minute power. But just from doing the crit races, that stimulus has really improved this whole range. And if I'm going to be having a crack at Zwift Academy to 2025, it makes sense to target this range rather than the longer duration efforts. As I'm never going to be much. If I might be able to get down to 80 kilos, I'm not going to be much lighter than that. Therefore, I need to be more of a puncher rider. I'm never going to be that GC type rider. So it'll be interesting next year because I saw nice improvement in these values just from doing the crit racing really, and no specific training stimulus other than a couple of sprints. So if I actually do some training that's specific to improving these values, it'd be really interesting to see if I can improve them. And I think that's going to be the main thing that's going to improve my road racing as well. As what's difficult in the road racing is you on a UK circuit you kind of have a short sharp climb of 2 minutes to 5 minutes. That's the decisive part of the course. So it's and you're doing these laps. You have to be consistent at getting up and over the climb each lap. So bringing up the peak power for these durations, it also brings up what your repeated. Well, you train the repeatability, but it also brings up what you're going to be able to produce at like a lower power but repeated times. So it'll be really interesting to see if I can tailor the training to be more specific to that next year. As like I said, this year it really wasn't that specific to it, but I still saw nice improvements. So hopefully next year we can be even greater gains.